Your brain does not care about what is true. It cares about what is efficient. If I tell you a lie once, your prefrontal cortex might flag it as an error. If I tell you that same lie twice, the error signal drops significantly. If I tell you the lie 9 times, your brain will not only accept it as fact, it will rewrite your neural architecture to ensure that this falsehood becomes the path of least resistance for all future thinking. We like to imagine that we are logic engines processing data based on accuracy. We are not. We are pattern-matching machines optimizing for processing speed. And in that optimization lies a critical security vulnerability that propaganda exploits. It does not just change your mind, it physically rewires the hardware of your hippocampus to prioritize speed over reality. Today, we are conducting a root cause analysis on the Illusory Truth Effect and the mechanics of false memory. We are going to look at the specific circuitry involved, the hippocampus, the parietal cortex, and the metabolic costs of processing fluency. We will look at why a repeated lie essentially hacks your brain's compression algorithm, making falsehoods feel chemically indistinguishable from facts. This is not about politics, this is about system architecture. If you want to understand the operating system running your life so you can patch these vulnerabilities, make sure you are subscribed to the lab. Let us look at the data. The standard assumption is that human intelligence acts as a firewall. We believe that when we encounter a new statement, we compare it against our existing database of facts, check for logical consistency, and then decide to store it or reject it. We assume that repetition is irrelevant to this validation process. If a statement is false, hearing it 10 times should just make it a frequent annoyance, not a fact. This is the logic filter myth. It assumes your brain has infinite bandwidth to critically audit every packet of incoming information. But from an engineering standpoint, infinite validation is impossible. It is too metabolically expensive. So, the brain uses a heuristic. It uses familiarity as a proxy for validity. The illusory truth effect is the robust statistical finding that repetition alone increases the perceived truth of a statement. But the danger is in the efficiency of the curve. A 2021 study analysing repetition frequency found that this is not a linear process. The curve is logarithmic. The single most dangerous moment is not the 100th time you hear a lie, it is the second. The data shows that the largest jump in perceived truth occurs between the first and second exposure. That single repetition moves the data from novel and suspicious to familiar and processed. By the time you have heard a claim 9 times, the gains plateau because the neural pathway is already established. This means the system is incredibly sensitive to initial redundancy. It does not take a bombardment to breach the firewall. It takes a double tap. Here is where the glitch becomes critical. You might think, I have stored knowledge. I know the capital of France. If someone tells me it is Mars, repetition won't work. The literature suggests otherwise. Experiments show that this familiarity signal is strong enough to overpower stored knowledge. Even when participants know the correct answer, or have been explicitly warned that the repeated items are false, the fluency of the repetition creates a friction-free processing path that the brain prefers. The familiarity signal arrives milliseconds faster than the fact-checking retrieval. Your brain feels the truthiness of the lie before it can access the fact of the correction. The system prioritizes the low latency signal over the high accuracy data. We cannot rewrite the logarithmic curve, but we can introduce a manual override. The protocol here is the latency pause. Since the familiarity signal is faster than the fact-checking signal, you must artificially induce lag. When you hear a statement that feels intuitively right or familiar, that is not a confirmation of truth, that is a confirmation of cache retrieval. You need to tag that feeling of ease as a warning sign, not a validation. Do not accept the first signal. Wait for the second signal. If a headline feels effortless to process, your immediate reaction should be skepticism of your own processing speed, not acceptance of the content. If you think that the illusory truth effect is just a quirk of memory, you are missing the bigger picture. That is just the software bug. The real problem is the hardware optimization that supports it. We need to talk about processing fluency. This is the mechanism that explains why smart people fall for dumb propaganda. It is not because they lack intelligence, it is because their brains are highly efficient at optimizing signal-to-noise ratios. And unluckily for us, propaganda is engineered to be the perfect, high-efficiency signal. Let us look at how your cortex essentially paves a highway for lies. We tend to believe that thinking feels the same regardless of what we are thinking about. We assume that processing a true fact and processing a false lie requires the same amount of mechanical work from the brain. This is incorrect. The brain is an energy-conserving organ. It constantly measures the fluency or ease of processing a stimulus. Information that is difficult to process triggers a subtle negative affect. It feels bad, or at least laborious. Information that is easy to process triggers a subtle positive affect. We confuse this ease of computation with truth. If it runs smooth, we assume the code is good. When you are exposed to a visual or verbal pattern repeatedly, neurons in your sensory and semantic areas adapt. They fire less. This phenomenon is called repetition suppression. It sounds negative, but it is actually an efficiency adaptation. The neural network has learned the pattern, so it needs fewer resources to represent it. It becomes a compressed file. This reduction in neural firing is what your conscious mind experiences as ease. It is the metabolic cost going down. Propaganda leverages this. By repeating a slogan, the propagandist is literally lowering the metabolic cost required for your brain to represent that slogan. It becomes cheaper to think the lie than to think the truth, because the lie has a dedicated, low-energy circuit. Think of your cortex as a landscape. New, complex truths are like hacking a path through a dense jungle. It requires machetes, effort, and calories. Repeated propaganda is a 6-lane superhighway. Uncle Buck's referential theory suggests that repetition increases the coherence of memory networks. The components of the lie become tightly interlinked. When you are tired, stressed, or doom-scrolling, your brain is in low-power mode. It will always choose the superhighway over the jungle path. It is simply the path of least resistance. You do not believe the lie because you analysed it. You believe it because your brain is lazy and the lie offered a paved road. To counter this, we must introduce artificial friction. You have to make the lie expensive to process again. When you encounter a repeated narrative, you must deliberately disrupt the fluency. Stop and rephrase the statement in your own words. Break the syntax. If the slogan is catchy, make it clunky. By forcing your brain to actively manipulate the data rather than just passively receiving the compressed pattern, you reactivate the critical analysis networks. You are forcing the brain off the highway and back into the jungle where the logic checking happens. Do not let the efficient circuit run on autopilot. Up to this point, we have discussed how the brain processes incoming data. But what about the data you have already stored? This is where the science gets truly disturbing. Most people think their memory is a storage vault. You put a file in, and it stays there, unchanged, until you pull it out. This is false. Your memory is not a vault. It is a text editor. And every time you access a file, you are liable to edit it. Propaganda does not just fool you in the moment. It opens your existing memories and rewrites the content. Let's look at the hippocampus. The read-only myth suggests that once an episodic memory is encoded, it is permanent and static. We think of our past as a library of fixed videotapes. If we remember an event, we trust that the footage is authentic. However, neuroimaging shows that retrieving a memory makes the original neural trace labile, unstable and changeable, before it is reconsolidated. It is like opening a Word document. While it is open, you can change the text. If the computer crashes, or if new data is inserted before you hit save, the file changes forever. In the classic misinformation effect paradigm, researchers show you an event, then feed you misleading information, then test your memory. Brain imaging reveals that during the misinformation phase, the hippocampus effectively reactivates the original memory trace. It brings the old file online. But now it is mixing the old signal with the new misleading input. The brain creates competitive traces. You have the original fuzzy memory and the new, sharp, clearly stated lie. Over time, the hippocampus and medial parietal cortex begin to favor the connection to the new information because it is often more coherent or repeatedly reinforced. The wiring physically shifts to support the false narrative because it has stronger current reinforcement. The specific glitch here is source monitoring error. The hippocampus is great at binding items together, who, what, where, but it can easily misbind the source. You remember the fact, but you lose the tag that says, "I heard this from a questionable blog." You just retain the content. Repeated propaganda accelerates this context loss. It strips the information of its dubious origin and integrates it into your general knowledge network. Eventually, you find yourself saying, "I read somewhere that X is true," without realizing that somewhere was a source you explicitly distrusted 2 weeks ago. The content remains. The source metadata is deleted. The patch for this is explicit source tagging. You cannot rely on automatic episodic memory to track sources for you. It is too lossy. You must externalize the metadata. When you encounter a new claim that reshapes your worldview, do not just store the claim, write down the claim and physically link it to the source in an external system, a notebook or a database. By externalizing the source, you prevent the hippocampus from stripping the metadata. You are maintaining a backup of the file context. If you cannot verify the source, you must tag the file as corrupted in your mind. Do not let it merge with your clean data. We have covered how lies become truth and how memory gets overwritten. But there is a final stage to this infection that is harder to detect. It is called the illusion of knowledge. This is where you not only believe the lie, but you become overconfident that you have known it all along. A 2024 paper showed that repetition inflates the subjective sense of long-term knowing. This is dangerous because it shuts down curiosity. You stop looking for data because you think you already have the dataset. This is the death of intelligence. We assume that we are aware of the gaps in our knowledge. We believe that if we do not know something, we feel a sense of ignorance that prompts us to learn. The illusion of knowledge suggests the opposite. Repetition creates a phantom dataset. People will claim they knew a statement beforehand, even if that statement was invented by the researchers and shown to them for the first time minutes ago. The brain misinterprets the processing fluency as retrieval from long-term storage. You think you are remembering, but you are actually hallucinating familiarity. Narrowly, this happens because repetition strengthens semantic links in the neocortex. It connects the new lie to existing concepts, associating rare earth crisis with Greenland, for example. When the network is coherent, activation spreads smoothly. This smooth spread of activation mimics the neural signature of accessing a well-established fact. The brain says, "This network is dense and connected, therefore it must be old knowledge." It backdates the memory. It is a timestamp error. The system assigns a creation date of years ago to a file that was created minutes ago, simply because the file is well formatted. This brings us to the economic problem. Truth is expensive. Lies are cheap dopamine. Truthful explanations are often complex, nuanced, and lack fluency. They require working memory, prefrontal effort, and the tolerance of ambiguity. That is metabolically taxing. Propaganda is designed to be simple, vivid, and highly rehearsed. It provides immediate closure and certainty. Engaging with it reduces anxiety and provides a sense of agency. It feels good to know the secret truth. This triggers the reward circuitry. Your brain is incentivized to accept the cheap, high-fluency lie over the expensive, low-fluency truth. You are fighting against your own reward system. The defense protocol is the newness audit. Whenever you feel a strong sense of, "I have always known this," regarding a political or social narrative, pause and ask for the timestamp. When did you actually learn this? Can you point to the specific study, book, or event where this data entered your system? If you cannot locate the ingestion point, but the feeling of knowing is strong, you are likely experiencing an illusion of knowledge. Treat obvious facts with extreme suspicion. Real knowledge usually comes with a clear memory of the struggle to learn it. If it feels too easy, it might be a hallucination of the repetition loop. We have looked at the hardware and the software. We know that repetition creates logarithmic increases in perceived truth. We know that fluency hacks the efficiency protocols of the cortex. We know that the hippocampus can overwrite original memories with competitive traces, and that the brain prefers the cheap dopamine of simple lies over the metabolic cost of complex truths. This is not a moral failing, it is a design limitation. The human brain was built for local survival, not for filtering global, high-frequency information warfare. You are running legacy hardware in a hostile digital environment. The only way to secure the system is to manually override the autopilot. Implement the latency pause. Create artificial friction. Externalize your source tags. And audit your feelings of certainty. Do not let fluency dictate your reality. If you want to keep upgrading your cognitive stack and patching these vulnerabilities, you know what to do. The lab is open. We are gathering data on how these protocols work in the field, so apply them and observe your own processing speeds. See you in the next cycle.